The Contest by Annie Proulx. There comes a time when Elktooth residents no longer take an interest in winter. Toward the end of March, the count of semis tipped over by the wind fails to amuse, and driving a long way around anywhere, Angle Iron Pass is closed even in a mild winter, has become an odious chore. Elktooth residents can take no more of reality. They embrace fads and fancies, and fortunes ride on rash wages. A few years ago, the idea of a beard growing contest inflamed the male population. Too late in the season to start then, but the Pee-wee regulars signed an oath, in Guinness for its ink-like colour, to put aside their razors the next winter, beginning on the day of the first snowfall. The beards would grow and there would be a prize for the longest to be presented on the following 4th of July. A few snowflakes drifted on September 12 and M.J. Speet, the large animal vet, whose opinions were widely respected, declared the start of the contest. Amanda Gribb, copying rodeo procedure, the rule of law in Elktooth, established a prize purse by collecting $10 from each contestant. The only businesses in Elktooth were the Elktooth Bank, the Western Wear and Feed Store, and the 3 bars, Pee-wee's, Muddy's Hole and the Silvertip. Each put $50 in the pot. The propane gas route man pitched in 10, but he said he'd forgo the chin grass. The money was stowed in a clean mason jar on the mirror shelf at Pee-wee's. 27 contestants, from 14-year-old Kevin Kokendall to octogenarian Len de Brock, signed up. Kevin Kokendall's father, Wiregrass Kokendall, told the kid he didn't have the chance of a pancake in a pigsty, but Kevin was determined and bought hair restorer with his allowance to help the nascent whiskers along. The other contestants demanded that old man de Brock shave before the contest started, as he showed a 2-inch frizz in his normal appearance. He shaved, protesting, but it seemed to the others that within days the 2-inch frizz had returned. They were heartened and the whiskers seemed to stall at that length without going on to glory. Daniel Mutch said it was because the hairs were set deep in the crevices and wrinkles of de Brock's ancient face, great furrows indicating a toothless condition. The story was that back in the 1950s, at some branding or other, a calf had kicked out de Brock's front teeth. With the blood seeping down his chin, he picked up the teeth, rinsed them with coffee, and jammed them back into the vacant spaces. Once they and their lucid neighbours failed, he had yanked every one cowboy style with a pair of pliers, bracing his head against a gatepost for leverage. Over the years, he had become an expert on culinary variations of cornmeal mush, his favourite recipe beginning, "Take a quart of deer blood." The beard showed odd colour and texture variations. Old man de Brock's whiskers were short and yellow-white. Deb Sipple's, as crinkled as ramen noodles, came in black with streaks of grey down each side. And Wiregrass Kokendall showed thick and fiery red bristle in contrast to the anemic blonde hairs of his son, Kevin. The game and fish warden, Krell Zudominski, also grew a red beard, no surprise, as his hair all over was the orange-red the paint store called Mandarin Sunset, a colour that clashed unmercifully with his official red shirt. Hardwinter Ulf, who'd been born during the blizzard of 1949 in some shack south of Wamsutta, showed jet black pencil-straight whiskers that stuck out like the spines of a hat-pin cactus. A sweat-faced Englishman with the chewy name of Lobert Pulvertoft Thurkel, working on the Fiesta Porches Ranch for the winter, joined in and contributed a faceful of tan 5 o'clock shadow. He was closely watched by Krell Zudominski, who knew that men with criminal pasts often took hired man jobs on remote ranches, and that their warped inclinations found outlet in poaching and carnal knowledge of anything warm. By January, the contestants' facial moss had thickened and lengthened to the point where most could scratch their fingers through the underbrush, and delighted to do so. Amanda Gribb complained, for the zinc counter was sprinkled with loose hairs night after night. "Worse than having a cat on the bar," she said. Shortly after Valentine's Day, it was clear that 3 of the 4 men had forged ahead: Daryl Mutch, Wiregrass Kokendall, Willie Hewson, colour of smashed sweet potato, and to his father's chagrin, Kevin Kokendall, whose few whiskers made up in length what they lacked in profusion. It's going to be terrible to shave all this hay off," said Munch. Deb Sipple, who did not like to hear references to hay, said it would be easy. "Just cut it down with scissors first, then take you a good hot shower and put on plenty of shave cream and you're home. Best thing is to go over to Landit to Thorne's barber shop. He'll make it easy. Just lay back and let him get it done. No, best way is to go down to Saratoga over to Thermop to them hot springs and let the waters come up to your nose, then skedaddle for the barber shop before them whiskers dries up and hardens. The sulphur in the water sort of rots the hair or at least softens it up, said Quint Stipp. Of course, the best way would be to bring your razor in the hot pool, but I don't believe they'd allow that. Rots the hair? You must have been ducking beneath the surface pretty frequent, said Al Mort, looking at Stipp's retreating hairline. Anyhow, I ain't going to shave nothing off. Got this far, I'll go end at the rope. Although the contest started out with jocularity, it turned cruelly competitive. Questions about beards came up which no one could answer. Amanda Gribb, tired of bar arguments that beards were or were not good protection against bronchitis, that vegetarians favoured beards more than creophagists, that beards inspired political radicalism. Beard talk made a change from speculation on the whereabouts of Daryl Mutcher's missing dog, Cowboy George, but none of the questions could be answered. Amanda, on her day off, sought out Mercedes de Silhouette, widow of Bill de Silhouette, a sheep rancher who had graduated cum laude from Princeton, over the years amassed a tremendous number of books on diverse subjects. Mercedes had inherited the sheep, the ranch, the house and its contents, including the books. Oh yeah, I still got 'em. Sold the sheep, kept the books. Don't know why. Don't hardly go in that part of the house. It's like a library in there. Stinks of Bill's old cigars too. Like a ghost was in there every night, smoking cigars and reading books. Mercedes led the way around the knotty pine corners through log-girded passageways into rooms of trophy heads and leather chairs, and at last into a large dim room with a northern clerestory. There were thousands of books from floor to ceiling in shelf stacks running the length of the space. She switched on the overhead track lights to augment the natural light, and book titles sprang forth: Saddle Galls, The Rooster Book, Into Suriname, and Colonel Mascara, and the like. How do you find a particular thing? Said Amanda. Has he got them put up like a library? No, and that's the trouble. He known where all the books was, but nobody else can find a damn thing. I spent days here once looking for something on cowboy songs. He had the books, and I knew he had 'em, especially the dirty ones, but find 'em I could not. Part of them he arranged by colour. See over there, all them shelves are red ones. There's a blue section and green, and after that I think he give up. No, there's mystery stories is yellow, and that's the most I know. Well, I'm looking for books about beards. You wouldn't happen to know if there's some of them, would you? Honey, there's everything else here. How did he ever get all those books? The idea that there were shops devoted entirely to books would have astonished the Pee-wee cow crowd, except for Erwin Hungate, who was a reader. His big tallow-coloured face buried in a book even at the bar. Give Deb Sipple a book, she thought, and he'd probably chew the covers off. Well, he bought 'em at junk stores and on the internet, but mostly he'd get 'em when he went to sheep conferences in different cities. The other men would go roostering around, but not Bill. He'd get right at the yellow pages and then find some second-hand book dealers, and then he'd go there and claw through them shelves until he picked out 50 or 60 he liked and have 'em sent up home. While he was in hospital, they kept coming, boxes and boxes of books. Over there in the corner, I never even opened them. So I'm just going to leave you to look, and if you find what you want, you can keep it. Amanda Gribb began with the colour-coded books and discovered that most of the blue ones concerned with ocean or exploratory voyages, that green books focused on natural history or forestry. She scanned the titles, alert for the words beard, hair, and moustache. After several hours, she discerned some kind of order in the groupings of the dusty books, and she was briefly hopeful when she found something titled Hair Cults. But this was an annoying collection of photographs of American and English hairdos from the 1960s and 70s, nothing whatsoever to do with the beard. There seemed to be a conceptual separation between head hair and facial hair. At the end of the afternoon, she had nothing but grimy hands. Feels like there ought to be a something. I'll come back and look some more if it's all right, said Amanda to Mercedes. Honey, you come back as much as you want. I'm real sorry you didn't find nothing. The next afternoon, when Amanda Gribb arrived at Pee-wee's to relieve owner Louis McCusty, he said, Mercedes de Silhouette called up. Says you come by after your shift, don't matter how late, 'cause she sits up watching old movies. She found what you want. I'd say go on ahead any time because I'm going to be right here tonight watching the game. Mercedes de Silhouette was wearing a pair of her dead husband's pyjamas and his claret-coloured silk bathrobe. She smelled of bourbon. Come on in, she said. I think I found you a good one. But it's hard reading, a lot of foreign language and them sideways-leaning words. Italics? Yeah, here it is. Too bad it don't have pictures. She handed Amanda an orange book titled simply Beards. It was an old book, dated 1950, but she saw, opening to a page entitled Culinary Instructions for Christian Cannibals, that it was rich in beard history. Richard the Lion-Hearted, she read, once entertained his warriors with a feast in which the piece de resistance featured the roasted heads of captive Saracens who had been shaved before going into the oven. Farther along, she spotted a passage on beards and vegetarians. This is good, she said. How did you find it? It's funny, I was cleaning out that big chest in the hall and I came on some of Bill's notebooks. There was one he'd written on the cover, Book Key. I looked in it and it was the system he used. Made me mad he didn't tell me about it before he went. Each one of them bookcases had a little number at the top. You seen that? I sure did. Well, in the notebook it tells what kind of books is in which bookcases. I looked for beards, but there wasn't nothing. So I tried hair, and there was about 7 books in this one. You can keep it. Amanda placed the book in a prominent position on the bar, and it was soon well thumbed and stained with various alcohols. No one could quite understand what the author, one Reginald Reynolds, was saying, as it was written in an abstruse and sarcastic style freckled with irony and untranslated Latin and French. The author also favoured maze-like circumlocutions and assumed his readers possessed profound knowledge of history, literature, seafaring, religion, military strategy, dialectic, nursery rhymes, and philosophy. He was given to mossy jokes, such as one about the Egyptologist, who discovered a bit of wire in an excavation and declared that the Egyptians had invented telegraphy, only to be aced by a rival who said that since no such piece of wire had been found in Assyrian side excavations, the Assyrians must have enjoyed wireless telegraphy. Still, the Pee-wee regulars sifted enough wheat from the chaff to make perusal of beards worthwhile. Amanda brought in a dictionary to aid Mr. Reynolds. Gradually, the vocabularies of the Pee-wee's patrons swelled with such splendid words as pogonophile, finuckery, gnostic, countenance, postiche, obelisk, serendipity, and the stirring phrase Floreat Barber. Enlightenment did not emerge, but curiosity flowered as they read of the ancient bearded horse-eaters, of a certain abbot who believed that eating too much was the cause of beards and thus explained why the American Indians, who lived on frugal diets, did not have beards. Adam, they discovered, had no beard in the Garden of Eden, the hairy growth punitively linked to the expulsion. Wiregrass Kokendall was thrilled to find a footnote referencing a Muslim story that the devil had only one hair on his chin, though of exceeding length, and used this nugget to taunt his son, Kevin. Kevin thumbed through until he found a passage describing civilization that killed the red-bearded men among them. If there were many examples of beards as fashion statements, metal threads worked in, dyes and gold dust, the pointed beards of Arabs, the rectilinear faux beards of the Egyptian, the curly extravagances of the Assyrians, the Hittite square-lace beards, plaited beards, immensely long beards that could be parted and looped around the ears. But, tempting as these arrangements sounded, no contestant dared sacrifice length to style. Vic Face took up the book often and read passages aloud, mangling his way through medieval French, church Latin, and antique English. Jesus, said Erwin Hungate, the reader. Lay off, will you? Sound like Umberto Eco. Who? Said Vic. I know him, said old man de Brock. Bert Eckel used to work for Bob Utley. He's out in Nevada now in a home for old cowboys. Erwin Hungate lifted his hand slightly and let it drop to show it was hopeless to explain. The beard growers combed through the Walmart pharmacy in Sac looking for unguents and lotions that would impart vigour to hair. They urged the druggist to order new improved products. Old man de Brock, rustling through the boxes under his bed, discovered a 1946 Real Western Stories magazine that featured an advertisement for a device that, when cranked, sent mild charges of electricity through the body and was, the ad claimed, and no-fail encouragement to hair. Pictured were three men whose combined hair could have stuffed a mattress. He dug out an ancient electric blanket from his storeroom and slept with it bunched up under his chin, happy to be absorbing whisker-stimulating electric juice. Daryl Munch rinsed his beard in a Viagra solution, immediate results not known. By late April, most of the beards were thick and bristly. Men sat around in peewees, eyeing one another's facial adornments. Daryl Munch was in the lead, but he had been in the lead before and then fallen back as Willie Hewson passed him by half an inch. Amanda Gribb was called on 6 times a day to measure someone's beard. She had a little tape measure Creel Zudominski once had given her. He used it for sizing animal tracks and the trout of out-of-state fishermen. Then, 2 springs back, he had developed a crush on Amanda and bought her the kinds of presents that game and fish employees believe superior to chocolates and flowers. An untenanted hornet's nest, a wolf scat, the pelvic bone of a sharp-tailed grouse, the miniature tape measure. The romance faded and died when Amanda took an interest in a fellow from Casper, who had invented a lotion he called Buckaroo Hand Cream, sparking vulgar witticisms among the ranch hand clientele. Amanda said her friend was going to be a millionaire by the time he was 35. According to my arithmetic, that order happened about 10 years back, said Creel meanly. He had taken to spending his afternoons in the peewee, one eye nervously on the front window watching for the game and fish vehicles. Because of his unpopular liberal views, he was a thorn in the flesh of his superiors, who plotted ways to fire him. Amanda Gribb kept a lookout as well, and when one of the department's trucks idled outside, she hissed, "Go fish!" and Creel ducked into the back room with its cases of empties and smelly mops. Creel's best friend was another bachelor, Plato Bucklew, his counterpart in the Forest Service, a big, axe-headed blonde who mixed up in fights and referred to as Platehead by those who found that his advocacy of roadless wilderness areas, wolves and horse logging veered dangerously from traditional attitudes. Amanda had a warning for him too. When she said, "Sure wish I had some pistachio ice cream," she meant that a Forest Service vehicle of that colour was in sight. The 2 troublemakers drank, hunted, fished together, and talked about the possibility of quitting their respective services and setting up a consulting business, though who would consult them and on what subjects was vague. They often spent Saturday afternoons in Creel's kitchen, Creel tying flies, Plato fashioning turkey wing bone calls. Then there was another bond. Both of their great-grandfathers had done time in the territorial prison at Laramie. Cephas Bucklew, a plasterer from Ohio, had stolen a horse blanket from a Cheyenne livery stable, and C.C. Alkerson, a ship's carpenter from Boston, imprisoned for perjury when he tried to claim bounty money on 3 non-existent wolf hives, enlivened Creel Zudominski's maternal lineage. Zudominski's father, who wrote Western love stories for True Confessions magazines under his wife's name, fell afoul of a jealous rancher. Most of his story ideas came from ranch wives. One suspicious husband who had found the elder Zudominski's attention to his wife proof of infidelity shot him as he was fastening the ranch gate. Creel's mother died 2 years later of complications from breast cancer, and after a few wretched months of his mother's sister and husband in encampment, he was sent to a boys' home and raised as an orphan. The 2 friends helped each other out of tight spots, such as the time when Plato, driving through a blinding whiteout with no visibility, ran off the road and into an open burial pit for a horse Daryl Munch had put down and, except for the horse, which was in situ, put off filling the hole. The cavity was precisely the same size as a Forest Service truck. It took the 2 friends most of one night to get the vehicle out with a heavy-duty tripod and winch. On this April afternoon, Creel was, aside from Amanda and Old Man DeBrock, the only one in the bar. He was deeply thirsty when he came in, but the state was up to its eyebrows in drought, and the small lakes and ponds on the wind-clawed prairie had dried up. The wind lifted fine alkali dust from the bottoms of the dead ponds, streamers of mineral particles blowing east. Creel, his throat stinging, had driven through clouds of the stuff. Rarely had beer soothed a more parched throat. He could see his beard in the mirror and was not displeased. It had grown thick and he had a tendency to curl under, thereby disguising its true length. He thought that when the tape measure came out on the final day, he would be a front-runner. "I'll have me another," he said to Amanda, who pulled him a fresh beer and slid it skillfully down the bar. He had barely lifted the glass when the throaty guzzle of a motorcycle out front drew his attention. An overweight, elderly man got off a silver bike the size of a short-legged horse. He wore a bandana on his head and a red silk scarf around his mouth in the classic style of stagecoach robbers. As he came into the bar, he unwound the scarf and pulled off the bandana, and Kryl Zudominski's mouth fell open. From under the silk emerged a huge white beard that could have filled a bushel basket. It covered the man from upper lip to belt buckle and was of a snowy, radiant white that seemed backlit by a full moon. Flowing into it as twin Missouris into Mississippi were masses of hair that, on a lesser man, would have been sideburns. And from crown to shoulder cascaded heavy, silvery waves of hair. Kryl Zudominski slowly grasped that he was looking at a tsunami of a beard. The stranger, ignoring Amanda Gribb's stare, called for a beer, but before he drank, he removed a silver straw from his breast pocket, an accoutrement favoured by maté drinkers of the Pampas. Amanda Gribb nodded with approval. Too often she had been called on to measure damp beards, whiskers clotted with hardened egg yolk, residues of mustard, individual crumbs clinging to hairs like boys swinging on ropes above a swimming hole. Here was a man who cared about his beard. Its luteous glow, its fluffed fullness, the mild fragrance of rose petals that wafted from it all declared a Pognophile Meister, as Reginald Reynolds might have said. Kryl Zudominski wanted to look at the stranger's license, and he slipped out expecting it would be a Montana plate. There was a belt of eccentrics and oddballs from Cook City to Livingston. Or maybe he would be from Nevada, a state which featured heavily bearded men everywhere except Las Vegas. This stranger would be a threat in Las Vegas, for he could easily hide a full deck of cards in his facial hair. Kryl was nonplussed to find identification from Rhode Island, a state he imagined the size of a Walmart parking lot. The motorcycle got a second look as well, as one of the new Harleys, a soft-tail V-Rod. Kryl had been saving up for 11 years to buy a Harley, but not this water-cooled modelled, which he knew had to have set the bearded one back 17 big bills. He re-entered the Pee-wee shaking his head. Amanda caught his eye and he mouthed, "Rhode Island." "Find what you were looking for?" said the stranger, and Kryl realised belatedly that the man had been watching him in the bar mirror. "Just wanted to see where you're from," mumbled Kryl. He could feel his own beard withering and half turned away from the Easterner. "Since you want to know, I was born in Syracuse, New Jersey on October 13, 1939. Name is Ralph Kalps. My father, Hayden Kalps, was a successful limnologist, and my mother, Virginia Rustling, studied batik in Borneo before the Second World War, then served as a curator of Asian fabrics for the New Jersey Textile Institute. I went to Princeton, graduated summa cum laude, did my graduate work in ergonomics, married, divorced, one daughter, taught for 32 years at various Eastern rat holes, and last week I retired. I am out here to see Mercedes de Silhouette, whose late husband was my roommate at Princeton in the sweet long ago. I plan to buy the old liner camp on their place and fix it up. Moving to Elk Tooth for my retirement. That help you out?" Kryl, his ears burning, said, "See you later," to Amanda, and left the bar. As he got into his truck, he saw Plato Bucklew coming out of the Western Wear and Feed store with a hat box under his arm. His bruised face and black eyes showed the results of a weekend fight in a distant parking lot. Plato liked to fight. Kryl beckoned him over. "You want to have the heart taken out of you? Go in Pee-wee's and see what's sitting at the bar. There's no sense in going along with this bad damn beard thing another day." But as he spoke, the stranger came out of Pee-wee's and began tying his monstrous beard up in its scarves. "Jesus," said Plato, scratching his crotch, a nervous habit he'd picked up in the army. They stared at the man, started up his V-Rod and swept away. "He's moving an Elk Tooth," said Kryl morosely. "Buying the old line camp out on the de Silhouette place." There was a considerable silence. "You know," said Plato Bucklew, "I don't care for them new V-Rods. If I was to get a motorcycle, it would be one of the old Buffaloes. You ever hear of them?" "Heard of them, but never seen one. Heard they never got off the drawing board," said Kryl Zudominski. "That might just be the best part of it," said his friend enigmatically. "Take a horse, myself." As far as they were concerned, the beard contest was over.